Welcome to another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones. Visionaries offering information with clarity, expertise, and substance. We are content experts. Let your voice be heard. Welcome to another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones, and with me, we have another special guest, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
All right, man. It's good to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me.
I really wanted you to come on the show. I deal with a lot of academics. We've had the opportunity, the privilege to interview doctors, lawyers, folks that are doing great work in the community on different levels. And oftentimes, when it comes to the grassroots levels, the areas that people such as yourself are doing, many times we don't really hear. We don't really hear about that. The community knows what's going on. But oftentimes the policymakers, the different people are in these various positions, they don't know about what's really happening on the ground. And I felt that just to have you here, Mr. Floyd Jarvis, by the way, folks, I felt like it was very important for your voice to be elevated, especially about the subject that we're talking about. So, without further ado, tell me about yourself. Tell me where you're from, what neighborhood or what community raised you to turn into the individual that you are today.
I was born in Guyana. Came to the States when I was, I think, 4. I grew up in Canarsie in southern Brooklyn most of my life. And I'm happy to be here.
Damn, and you mentioned the community Canarsie. Myself from Brooklyn, Canarsie is, and Crown Heights in particular, Canarsie is a neighboring community. We're all, especially coming from the West Indies, myself coming from Trinidad, we all, in some cases, we went to the same parties, we went to the similar schools, we had similar upbringing in terms of our community and just as a young black male and what we went through. So Canarsie is in the news lately, right? It's in the news, one, because of the untimely death of Pop Smoke. Rest in peace. For many of you are aware of what happened, but I don't want to necessarily dwell on that. What was something about this community? What is something about this community that you would tell to anyone from the outside that this is why my community is so special?
Like, you can see the smile on my face. I'm getting to talk about my hood. But anybody that knows me knows that I love my hood. I love my neighborhood. I grew up there. I literally became a man in my neighborhood, from a boy to a man. And wherever I go, I rep my hood. So Canarsie was like a final stop for many first generation Caribbean families. This is because of two issues, because of white flight, and also because of, I don't like using the G word, gentrification. I like using planned shrinkage, benign neglect, and there's another one, planned shrinkage, benign neglect, and something else. But when you use the terms of planned shrinkage, meaning you're planning to shrink the city services. Benign neglect, you're gonna neglect just a little bit. You're gonna take away sanitation, you're gonna take away policing, you're gonna take away teachers, and once this neglect becomes so big, then it looks like it's their fault. So I try to, because gentrification is like a fancy word, like people, you understand, they go Google Gaga over it, because with gentrification, people think like, oh, what's the good about it? But if you say benign neglect and planned shrinkage, you're like, oh, they was messed up from the jump.
So definitely, and folks, this is why it's important for us to have these discussions, because a lot of times we see the community, we see the shape that we find our communities in, and we don't understand what went into that. We don't understand what was, again, the benign neglect, what was taken away from our community to find us in the state that we are. And despite this, we still have neighborhoods and communities that are thriving, that are doing great. Canarsie is one of those neighborhoods that has been on the forefront as far as developers and different people looking to buy our property. And East New York is one of those communities as well in Brooklyn that our folks are being pushed out by high rent raises and these things. Like myself, I looked at purchasing a home in Canarsie, and the prices are, compared to in the 90s and so on and so forth, is pretty high. So, it's important for us to be aware, especially the community, to be aware of the beauty of our neighborhoods, and also the history of our neighborhoods. And you yourself, in regards to history, you're currently in college right now, and you're pursuing your master's degree. What is the area that you're pursuing? Because it falls in line with this discussion and your grasp of history and grasp of policy. But what is the degree that you're pursuing? And tell us why specifically did you choose that degree?
I'm at the New School studying public and urban policy.
Yeah.
I chose public and urban policy because I wanted to. I was looking for a quicker way to affect change other than going to law school. Because law school would take 3 years. You had to take the LSAT, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
The New School didn't require any prohibitive racist standardized testing. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go there. And also, my good friend and mentor, he wasn't then, but he became one after I took his class, now colleague, Dr. Derek Hamilton. So yeah, really to learn under his tutelage, and then some other professors that I looked up there. The class I took with him was called Racial and Economic Disparities. And to culminate the class, at the end of the class, he and I sat on a panel in Albany on cannabis equity. By the end of the class, we were colleagues because I started doing my cannabis equity, my marijuana stuff. And they wanted the Start Smart New York campaign wanted someone to talk about if cannabis equity was reparations. And he went up there and he let them know that it is not reparations, and to call it such would be a disservice to the people that's been fighting for reparations for all this time.
Great work that you're doing as far as the Canarsie Neighborhood Alliance. And one of the things you spoke about, it was marijuana equity. Let's talk about that, because it's in the news. There's states like Colorado, there's states like, I just came back from California last week, and everywhere I looked, there was a dispensary, there was people, purchasing marijuana openly. And why should New York, adopt this policy? What can we talk about the history, or some of the history of how New York has been policing marijuana? What would it look like if we become a legalized state? And what should New York do in order to make that happen and be fair to the people that have been, marginalized prior to that? And I asked a lot of questions, but let's talk about like New York and marijuana.
Got you. So, as an individual as well as my org, we are part of the Start Smart New York campaign. The Start Smart New York campaign is a group of individuals and organizations that are looking to legalize cannabis within the state of New York in a fair and equitable way. Yeah. And what that means is righting the wrongs of the racist and misandric war on drugs and the harms that it not only had on individuals but also communities.
Yeah.
During the war on drugs, during cannabis prohibition since about 1939, 1930s, no other state, no other municipality has locked up more people, has arrested more people than the city of New York. Because we got a bunch of, for me, like, and straight up black people, wherever black people are, like those marijuana arrests are gonna increase. Because in my study, so I'm writing a working paper called Keeping Black Markets Black, a stratification, economic, public health, and reparative justice model for cannabis equity in the city of New York. The lens and the framework that I use in my work is always a black masculinist lens. And a black masculinist lens seeks to frame and center the lives and experiences of black boys and black men, always. And it's only right because in 1930, when the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which would morph into the FBI, Harry J. Anslinger, his framing of how to get the feds to make a plant illegal was to demonize black men. He said that it would make black men think they're equal to white men if they bun the herb, if they smoke ganja. It would make white women want to have sex with black men. You understand? This is what was said by the then head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. You understand? So you could check out movies like Reefer Madness and check out all the advertising back then. It was the black male body was demonized in order to make this thing illegal.
Yeah. So and we can continue. We read the certain books, New Jim Crow, movie 13 is ample evidence to show that there's a disparity. But my question, as a result, of we understand the concern and we understand what we're striving for, but what does it look like to employ individuals who have been disenfranchised or marginalized, legally? What can we learn from the mistakes? And I'm saying the mistakes of, and not even the mistakes, but also the purposeful way that Colorado and other states have done when it came to making billionaires even richer, and really pushing out these small dispensaries and so on and so forth. How can New York learn from that?
So again, cannabis equity is about bringing those persons that were marginalized into the franchise, making sure that these persons have access to these 9 licenses in this completely new legal market. It's completely new.
Yeah.
So when you have a new legal market under capitalism, it's a money grab. Yeah. Everybody's jumping in on a money grab.
Securing license, patents, everything. Yeah.
You understand?
So question, you mentioned the 9 licenses. What are we talking about? We're talking about everything from distribution of marijuana. What are the 9 different areas that we can seek licensure? And also, are you saying that individuals who have been previously incarcerated for marijuana possession or impacted for marijuana possession, should they now be issued licenses, or should they be able to work for folks who have licenses? What does that look like?
Got you. So the bill currently that Start Smart New York is pushing is called MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. The bill that the governor is pushing is called CERTA, Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act. The governor's bill is not as equitable, it's not as fair, it's not as just. It's not just equitable or fair compared to MRTA.
Yeah.
Were the governor to pass his bill, him and all his cronies and his big marijuana, they would eat all the food.
Yeah.
When the man on the corner that's been doing it for years, he would be pushed out again. Because remember, he got on the corner by being pushed out, by being marginalized. So I hope it doesn't happen again when it's legal. So what cannabis equity calls for? So in New York State, in the MRTA bill, there's 9 different licenses to produce, to sell, to have a dispensary, to have a consumption site, to test. It's a whole list, 9, right down the supply chain.
Gotcha.
And as you know, with supply chain, these are jobs.
Yeah.
And we just mentioned
even the bags,
all that,
the canisters, everything. Yeah.
We mentioned who is the highest, who has the highest unemployment rate. Is the person with the highest unemployment rate are the same persons that have been targeted for cannabis. So it's like for me, any right or just person that's doing this, you have to do the right thing. Yeah. But at any rate, these 9 different. So another thing that we're asking for in the MRTA, or we're demanding in the MRTA, when we say demand, we shut down the bill last year in 2019 because the governor, once we brought up community reinvestment, so individual reinvestment would be to clear criminal records and have these and have cannabis equity. And another part of it is community reinvestment. Yeah. These tax dollars go directly back into the community yeah. that we need. When the governor saw that, he started having the hiccups. But at any rate, one of the, so it's different with, so everybody can't have a dispensary, everybody can't have a license, everybody can't have a peddler's license. So one of the novel ideas that I came up with was participatory budgeting. One of the ways, so participatory budgeting gives communities the chance to spend up to $1 million, or at least $1 million, on whatever project or community infrastructure that they want, right? What I'm calling for in my paper is having equity applicants. And equity applicants is someone that was directly impacted by the war on drugs, meaning you were arrested for cannabis for cannabis possession, cannabis sale, or what have you. There's other criteria, but I like to keep it on the eye, the persons that were directly impacted.
Well, I certainly think that this was a good discussion as far as cannabis and just in general about the work that you're doing. I think you're doing phenomenal work, and really the history, the breadth and scope of what you discuss, it speaks to many people who have not had somebody to share that voice. Because I'm from Brooklyn, I'm from the community, I'm in places where, when we're in these big meetings, we talk PG. We talk, hey, equity and all these other things. And then when we get back to the community and to the neighborhood, they're talking about how they really feel about some things. And this is the common conversation that we need to have. And you guys need to really be aware of what people are saying in the community, because we're really being impacted by all these laws. Our boys are getting arrested. And I tell women all the time, you give birth to us. So it's important for you to understand what happens after we come out your body, and the likelihood of us being incubated in your body for 9 months and possibly be incubated in the prison system for 9 years. So, once again, great to have you on the show. Is there anything that you want to leave the viewers with in general about the work that you're doing? Some of the projects that you're working on. Please share. Leave us with any final thoughts.
So there's two things I want to say. Any person that is trying to do cannabis equity and community reinvestment, if the marker that you're using is income and not race, that plan will fail the people that were directly impacted.
Okay.
Again, if you're using income as a marker and not race, that plan will fail. Yeah. So the controller, he released a study of these neighborhoods that were impacted, and he used income. The neighborhoods of Canarsie, Southside Jamaica, Queens, Hollis, East Flatbush, Northeast Bronx, they were not included in those for the neighborhoods to receive those cannabis tax dollars. However, if you check that DPA study that used race, these were some of the 15 top neighborhoods that were arrested. That's why you always have to use race when you're talking about cannabis equity. And lastly, I want to share, so much of my research, what has helped my research is a book by Ainsley Hamid. It's called The Ganja Complex, Rastafari and Marijuana. And this is an ethnography by a former CUNY professor, Trinidadian too. You got to read it, bro. You're going to love it. It's an ethnography. Ainsley Hamid, an East Indian, he went back home to Trinidad to study Afro-Caribbean youth in San Fernando, right? And what he found was, this is post-colonial Trinidad, right? Post-1965 Hart-Celler Immigration Act, when a lot of us started coming up here. So a lot of parents left their sons and their daughters back home, right? This is a new Trinidad, a new British West Indies. So many of these new governments, they were pushing to be foolishly somewhat like the British. So if you wasn't doing good in school, you got pushed out, you got pushed to the margin, and you ended up in prison. Yeah. What was going on in prison in the 60s and 70s? Rastafari, the doctrine of Rastafari was spreading through the prison system. One of the sacred tenets of Rastafari is the holy sacrament of the herb, ganja, right? So in this book by Ainsley Hamid, it showed how these young men that were pushed out in the 60s in Trinidad with nothing, parents wasn't, because remember I told you that there was a fiscal crisis in the 70s. So those remittances that were expected from the parents, they wasn't coming back to Guyana, to Trinidad, to Jamaica. It wasn't coming back. Yeah. It was nasty. You understand? It showed how these young men, after going to prison, after finding Rastafari, then finding marijuana, finding the doctrine of Marcus Garvey, which is self-reliance, began to cultivate the herb to sustain themselves, right? And it showed, you ready for this now? You're going to bust your head. It showed how these same young men that were pushed out, right, in developing this new cannabis economy, they were able to buy their plane ticket to come up to Brownsville, to Crown Heights, to Bed-Stuy, to Flatbush, and open their own marijuana gates and buy buildings. I'm getting shivers talking about it. And buy buildings off of illicit cannabis, all while still being marginalized and pushed out. And in this book, it was the first time I heard the word paterfamilias. Paterfamilias in Latin means where the male is the head of the household. In the book, it shows how these young men that were hell-bent on destruction, self-destruction, became successful paterfamilias because of ganja.
But think about, again, talking about males head of the households in our communities, especially where the crime and the rates are so high in all these other areas. The male is not the head of the household. The males are not activated in employment in other areas. So this is just another sign, another design, another way that we could identify that our communities are struggling. And it's important for us to allow our voices to be heard. And that's why I really appreciate you and the lens that you have coming from an academic perspective. Because many of us see the problems but may not understand how to articulate those problems to people that are in these positions and are able to write a 60-page, 100-page article or whatever the case may be on this. And this is the key that we need to get into some of these rooms. Not everybody has the wherewithal and the fortitude to do it. But when we do, and when we are able to do it, you know, we are able to make changes, man. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective. And hopefully somebody out there, hopefully you guys got something from this episode. You got something in regards to the importance of having marijuana, not equality, but marijuana equity. And understanding the importance of those who have been impacted by marijuana arrests and by false negative policies that have impacted our community, for us to be among those that are able to actually support our families with this legalized products that people all over this country that are now taking advantage of. So other than that, man, you guys be great. It's another episode of Voices. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this episode? How do you feel about marijuana equity? Please contact us. Please contact Floyd. Please share your information. How can folks get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure.
Social media.
Sure. My name, Floyd Jarvis, on Facebook. My email, CanarsiAlliance@gmail.com. And on the gram, it's just like_Shumba. SHUMBA.
Absolutely, man. Once again, another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones, signing off. Peace.